Yeah, in the book you mentioned a few methods of generative trance. Which method would you recommend for people who are fairly new to trance or would like to try it, or which one would be?
Well, one of the, I have this notion of that reality is constructed through filters.
Yeah.
And there are different types of filters. And the three general types of filters that I tune into, that use in the model, are somatic filters, cognitive filters, what I call the field filters, which are the sort of the context that you carry around with you and that you navigate around with you. So different people may find that the best way for them is to go through body, to go through the somatic filters. So you might do something like, I have a technique in there about spinal attunement. It's just about how to gather your attention and to feel it flowing up and down through your body. So you settle in, settle down, you move from thinking verbally to being aware of your breathing. You begin to breathe up your spine, up through the top, down, for example, etc. And then you take a simple idea that would represent your positive goal, like good health, for example, and you just practice dropping that through. That's a simple idea.
Yeah.
Other people who would be maybe more auditory, they might, start with more of a verbal technique, like the technique that Milton Erickson's wife used to teach his students. We used to call it the Betty Erickson special.
Yeah.
Would be this attunement of, now I'm aware that I see, and you just fill in, now I see, if I'm closing my eyes, now I see stars. Now I'm aware that I hear, silent. Now I'm aware that I feel sensation in my hands. So it's a way of what in NLP was called pacing, of bringing the words to join exactly with the way what's happening in each moment, as a way to release this separate verbal mind that is thinking, how do I control things, to harmonizing with your experience, which releases the tension. So there's a lot of different ways, and if you're a practitioner, you have to know a lot of different ways so that you can find out which would be easiest and most helpful for a given client.
In the book you give a lot of helpful methods and things that people can already use, starting using generative trance.
Yeah. And partly the thing I think you want to avoid is that there is the one single technique. Because, one of the great things about Erickson was he said, it's not really about the technique, it's about this curiosity about how to connect. And any technique, trance technique, becomes obsolete. I think partly because it starts in the first phase of learning, it really starts in the frontal cortex. And when it's in the frontal cortex, you have sensory experience connected to it. It feels fresh, and it will have more of a trance effect because it's got all the sensory experience. Yeah. Once you routinize something, once you do it and practice it, it shifts to another part of the brain, and now it's in a more abstract form. And so it doesn't have the liveliness that's needed to make an experiential difference, which usually means time to find another technique. So if you work with people like chronic pain, who might have this challenge over a period of time, you would never want to teach them one technique, because it's likely that whatever technique they find value from, the principle of impermanence will obtain. Maybe 2 or 3 weeks later it's not working in the same way, but rather than saying, oh, it's not working, you say, oh, I need to find another one. And hopefully what I'm learning is I have this connection to the creative part of me. And I have a way to hook up with that and be curious about how I can have a conversation with it. So I'm in this continual process of learning from my creative unconscious how to meet the challenges of every day in a fresh, interesting way.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting you mentioned, because we live in challenging times. People are under enormous pressure. There's a lot of going on. How can people intelligently use generative trance?
Well, to realize that pressure of you buying into it is basically going to deny you all the important positive things in life. You know, what I call the 4-H club, which is what some of us joined in as kids. But the 4-H club here is happiness. Mm-hmm. If you are in neuromuscular lock, if you're in stress, you can't be happy. You know, you can't feel that well-being. That's the basis for happiness. Health. If you're in stress, your health will suffer. I mean, this was the guy that developed the idea of stress was Hans Selye, who was in 1930s Montreal physician. He noticed that as they were going around, he was a young medical doctor resident. They were saying, well, this patient has this illness, this patient has this illness. He said, I couldn't help but notice they all look sick. And the general fact of their sickness was more intriguing than the specific diagnosis. So he said it suggested there was an underlying general mechanism, and he used the term stress. But that stress is what I call neuromuscular lock. Yeah. It's called a sustained orienting response. And it shuts down the immune system, because those are the two defenses that the body has. The immune system, which is sort of the background, and the orienting response, which is danger, 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 put all your resources into what do I do, what do I do, what do I do. So happiness, health, your capacity to heal, you know, all the research on traumatization shows that as long as you're in the battle, you don't want to give any of your resources to healing. So if you have tissue damage, for example, if you're in the heat of battle, you don't want to say, I want to let my unconscious heal that wound. You got to keep fighting. Yeah. The way that the body knows, not only in humans but in all animals, okay, the danger's over. Time to do the restorative, time to do the healing is relaxation, and finally healing. As human beings, we get wounded a lot, in a lot of different levels. It's part of the journey. Yeah. And so if you want to be able to heal, you can't do it if you're under stress. So that's the rationale. The additional rationale is if you want to live creatively, if you want to realize your dreams, you can't fall into the stress trance. Well, the science says, you better go faster, you better go faster. And I think that's what we face in this increasing way. This idea is if you go faster, your performance will be better. Every culture that I've asked, and I think I've up to 18 cultures now, I said, in your culture, do you have a story about the race between the turtle and the rabbit? Do the Dutch have this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, 19 out of 19 then. In some cases, like the Germans must have killed all their turtles, so they have hedgehogs, you know. That's a story about why did every culture, now 19 out of 19, why do they tell this trance story to all their children? There's something, a really fast intelligence and a much slower, but the one who crosses the finish line is the one who takes his time. That's the unconscious. So we've lost that tradition of how to settle, of how to listen, of how to emphasize quality of consciousness rather than more. And the results are devastating. Yeah. So I think that with this work we can make a case to people we work with. Not only will you feel better, but your performance will be superior.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to work a lot. I mean, I'm working all the time. I couldn't do the work that I'm doing. I couldn't like be going all over if I didn't do these practices at least an hour a day.
Yeah.
They're absolutely integral. So I have them as a contract, as a requirement for myself to do
practice. Practice.
Yeah. And again, hopefully what I'm practicing is how to be curious. What I'm practicing is how not to isolate.
Yeah.
You know, what I'm practicing is how to connect to the wonderment of life. And that is what Milton Erickson taught me. I mean, this guy suffered so much in his life, you know. The stuff that life put on his plate, you know, this paralysis and his pain and his dyslexia. He had a tough life.
Yeah.
The guy never complained. You know, he just sort of met the challenge. And he said, life gave this to me as an opportunity to find out how to learn in a more interesting way.
And he gave a lot to the world as well.
I think
all his
tremendous. But to me, I mean, I have photographs of like him and Carl Jung and my Aikido, the founder of Aikido, in my office. And there have been many times where I'm in some sort of self-pity or something. Oh, life is so hard. And I look at this guy's photograph and I think, this guy had it 10 times harder than I could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And he met those challenges gracefully, courageously, but his main principle was life is to be enjoyed. Life is to be enjoyed. So these are ways to allow you to enjoy your life and to live a challenging life. Because it's really a challenging life that for most of us is what's going to make us happy.
Yeah.
You know, if we just sat around on the couch all day, it might sound appealing, but for most of us, it wouldn't be a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
You know, so we say, well, these are ways to really help me live my dream life and to enjoy it.
Great. Thank you so much for this interview.
You're welcome.
Thank you.